My name's Parry-Slater and I used to be a face-to-face trainer, but I've moved on. I think we all have to move on, and the reason is social. When you last booked your holiday, how did you do that? You would have gone to a travel agent back in the day, but nowadays what we do is we would go onto Facebook and ask our friends, we would ask our family, we would go onto TripAdvisor or other websites like that. We use the digital age in our personal lives all of the time. But when we step into the business place, that work context, it doesn't really transform that digital learning space, that digital sharing space, the same way as it does in our private lives. And I think this is the first time that business has done that private lives have actually overtaken our business lives in terms of using digital better, using digital more wisely. Back in the day when I was a face-to-face trainer, what we would do is we would have Sage on the Stage. I would be the subject matter expert and I would have 20 people in a room and I would talk to them and maybe they'd do a little bit of interaction with each other. But once they left that room, they'd go back to their daily business life and it wouldn't translate. It wouldn't necessarily be a thing that they could implement in their normal everyday life. They would have to sort of have some sort of great manager who would remind them about the training that they had. I call that injection education. Injection education is really where you have one opportunity to learn, one opportunity to take on board lots and lots of knowledge, and that knowledge injection isn't always contextual to you personally or contextual to your role back in your working life. And it has to change, it doesn't work. Ebbinghaus taught us decades and decades ago that we can't remember. So why in business do we keep going forward with only giving one-stop opportunities? Now what's happened is people have recognised the Sage on the Stage, the actual workshop environment isn't necessarily the best place. So they've gone to e-learning. They've sort of changed from being in a workspace to being in an online space. But again, it's only one injection, it's only one choice of solution. So what I'd rather see moving forward is actually a more social learning piece. Now what do I mean by social learning? Social learning is learning from each other. Take, for example, that workshop. You've got your Sage, you've got your expert, your subject matter expert, and you've got your peer group that you're learning from. Imagine those people on a good day, every day. For me, that's social learning. What's important to move away from injection education is to give a multitude of different offerings. So we don't just have a workshop, we don't just have e-learning, we have those plus more. An opportunity for a peer-to-peer solution, so a Google Plus community, for example, or even buying, there's many off-the-shelf solutions now, learning experience systems as opposed to learning management systems, where you can put cohorts, you can put peer groups and allow them to support each other. Some people don't want to actually raise their hand and say, do you know what, I didn't understand. But it's okay to not understand as long as you know who you can ask. You've got somebody to ask, you've got a group that you can get together with, or you've got a resource base. That might be a Google Plus community, that might be a learning management system, that might be your intranet. All of these places are fine. What's important is the learner is in charge of that journey. The learner in a social learning context is the person who is actually driving their own engagement. Now, why wouldn't a learner, a worker, an employee want to drive their own learning, want to actually be in a social learning environment? There's no reason for it. They're in charge of their own career, they're in charge of their own destiny. Why should it be their manager or their HR or their L&D director who dictates their learning journey for them? Learning for me is actually most successful if it's part of the workplace, part of everyday process in work. So we don't have a process, a transactional process on how we do our job without interspersed with how do I do my job if I don't know how? Where do I go? Where are my resources? Who are my experts? How do I get hold of them? And it's perfectly acceptable, for example, to be on your intranet watching a video. That's actually work. It's not a separate thing. It's not something that we shouldn't be doing. It's actually something that our managers should be encouraging us to do if we have a social learning context within our workplace. So thinking about social learning in the workplace, it's all very well the theory behind it. We know Ebbinghaus, we know we need to move away from injection education, but how do we actually do it? Well, it is actually easier than you might anticipate. The how really is connected to the why. Why would you want to do it? So take, for example, you have a transactional process in place, but not everybody in that team or that workplace knows how to run through that transactional process. How do you actually train them? How do they learn how to do that? Now, back in the day, as we've talked about, they would have gone to a workshop. They could have been in place for 3-4 months before that workshop came up, or before that external trainer came into the business in order to train them. Of course, that's not realistic. So what do they actually do? Well, they actually take social learning to themselves, and they do it anyway, whether you want them to or not. They ask the person sitting next to them, they ask their boss, they get together in a team meeting and they find out how to do their transactional job by asking their peers. So in terms of social learning in a formal space, all you need to do is formalize it. You need to give them a way of actually doing that, a place where they can go to find out, you know, not necessarily the person next door to them, but actually the official story, not what they've been doing wrong, slightly wrong for 20 years, but actually what you want them to be doing, but in that type of way. So this might be, for example, short videos from subject matter experts. So when somebody has a question about how to, I don't know, in my world of global mobility, move a horse from New York to China, then how do they do that? They can have a short video on that, or they can go to a webinar perhaps on that. Every 3 months you might run webinars, every 3 weeks you might run webinars. All of these things are easily implemented because they're bite-sized, they're very short interactions. It's not a whole day out of the office. Of course, everyone loves a day out of the office, good biscuits, fiddle toys, great trainer, socialization, that's all fantastic. But in the real world today, we don't have the time. We don't have the money and the resources to allow 20 people out of our office every few weeks. But you do have the resources and you do have the time to allow them a 30-second, a 3-minute video, something like that, where they can actually learn as they're doing the job. It's performance support. Bob Mosier taught us all about it. I respect him for it. So that's just a little example of how you could implement a transactional workplace environment into a social learning space. But there's so much more you can do. The great thing I love about social learning, and the thing why I've really moved away from injection education and being the sage on the stage, is because anything goes. Anything is possible. You could run any type of learning you like. You could only run social. You could have no video. You could have only video. Any of these things, because it's why you're doing it, which is key. Once you know the reason for the learning, then you can provide any type of media, any type of community that's required in order for your learners, remember they're in charge of their journey, but for your learners to take that journey forward so that you as a business can actually be more effective, more efficient, and all of this is a lot cheaper than Sage on the Stage, getting people together. You're doing it in a virtual way and it's just as effective. Hopefully that's a little bit of a taste for you. If you want to know any more information, then the CIPD will be able to provide that for you. Thanks very much for listening.